I'd like to spend a few moments first thanking PRC and then discussing the Sylvester most people did not know. I've spent the last 45 years of my life working as an attorney representing recording artists, mostly from the 1950s and 60s, in their never-ending quest for fair treatment in the music industry. In sum, I've represented hundreds of artists. It was at all times a thrill to represent the cultural icons who brought joy to my youth. The very first artist I ever represented was the Two Tons, long before they became the Weather Girls. I still represent Martha Wash to this day, 46 years later. I spent years in the national media, including major city newspapers, news and trade magazines. I've made many national TV appearances, but what I just couldn't get was any recognition in my hometown of San Francisco. This is the place where I've always felt safest and most comfortable, but obscure. In 1982, I designed, built, and operated the Oasis at 11th and Folsom. My business plan was very different from the leather bars. I wanted a multicultural, multi-generational, and multiracial oasis for everyone. The only club that came close was the original Stud on Folsom, but it had a far narrower demographic than I was seeking. At the Oasis, if a woman had open-toed shoe, she was welcome. If a person of color came to the door, my response was, "Thank you for coming, I hope you come again." We did not have exclusionary policies. We never asked anyone who looked over 21 for ID. We held fundraisers for the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence before other major clubs. We premiered the Weather Girls music video of It's Raining Men. So imagine my surprise recently when I read an article in the Chronicle about how the Oasis was opened in 2015. No, it wasn't. It was founded as a queer bar where the gender fluid were always welcome 33 years earlier. I did not much mind being deprived of the credit, but it certainly shortchanged my two business partners and our 50 queer employees who did our best to make Soma a place where everyone was welcome at a time when that was just not true. Being honored by PRC tonight with a Community Service Award bearing Sylvester's name was worth the wait. Now, I'm particularly honored to receive an award in Sylvester's name because he was far more of a community activist than people knew. I first met Sylvester in December 1970 when he was a member of the Cockettes. I don't think there would have been a fabulous Sylvester without the Cockettes. The social order in 1970 San Francisco was in major upheaval. People remember the 1967 Summer of Love, but largely lost to time was the surrounding culture that existed during those years. At that time, there were over 300 communes in the Bay Area. Some were devoted to sourcing food for other communes, like the Free Food Conspiracy. Some engaged in political theater, like the Diggers and the San Francisco Mime Troupe. Some fixed cars. Some were devoted to life during earlier periods, like the 1930s. And then there was an offshoot of Cauliflower, one of the earliest communes that celebrated gay liberation as the cause was then known. That loosely organized offshoot was the Cockettes. Its dedicated purpose was to destroy the patriarchy through relentless public mocking while in exaggerated gender-bending and gender-blending attire. Their stage shows were not just backyard musicals. They were political satire. At first blush, Cockettes audiences could see the spoof, but if you watched carefully, the troupe was culturally subversive to the core. A visit to the Cockettes commune at 946 Haight Street was an outing to another planet. A distinctly different scenario unfolded in every room. It was like walking from one adjoining silent movie set to another, where different films were being shot. Everywhere you looked, their technique was being honed. Not all the Cockettes continuously lived in the commune. Some were commuters. Goldie Glitters lived in Berkeley. and by that time, Sylvester lived in an apartment on Market Street with John Rothermill. That is where I spent my first private time with Sylvester. Sylvester had a bit of a reputation for being a diva, but it was really not well deserved. People may recall Sylvester's outrageous persona, but they likely missed that he was far more of a skilled performer and a community activist than an exhibitionist. If you listen carefully to the stories about Sylvester's arguments over Coquette's stage productions, you'd hear about complaints that the other troupe members had forgotten their lines and had forgotten their stage marks. Those who sensed a prima donna in Sylvester failed to see his drive for everything to be better for everyone. I think the most accurate way to assess Sylvester's life is to draw a through line from his time with the Coquettes until he passed in 1988. His sense of community activism was born in 1970, and it was an overarching drive for all of his adult days. There was never a place where Sylvester was more beloved than in the Castro in the 1980s. Yet, he could be seen on a street corner taking to task anyone who showed public disrespect to a marginalized person. He accepted none of that. Queer people have often described to me their sense of pride and belonging dancing in a club to Sylvester's music. I think the experience people described was the one that Sylvester intended. I think he was one of the most purpose-driven people I had ever known. It showed up every time he appeared at an AIDS benefit, long before it was either professionally safe or fashionable. You might have seen the picture of Sylvester in the 1988 gay parade being pushed down Market Street in a wheelchair, emaciated, weary, but glorious. To some, it might have seemed that Sylvester just wanted a bit more attention. But what I saw was Sylvester taking away the stigma from AIDS and making a statement that everyone has a right to feel pride in themselves, even when facing imminent death. I do not think Sylvester was there for himself. I think he was there to make life easier for others in his condition. I'll tell you two facts that I believe confirm my views of Sylvester's character and moral center. He loved his family, but he left his multi-million-dollar royalty accounts to help others. He left 75% to the AIDS Emergency Fund, which is now PRC. And he left 25% to Rita Rocket's food program to feed AIDS patients at SF General Hospital, which is now in the hands of Project Open Hand. Yes. I don't think there was ever a time when Sylvester did not hold dear to his heart the well-being of the greater queer community. We rightly celebrate his artistry, but in events like here today, where community service is honored in his name, we can remember him as a humanitarian who never missed an opportunity to make everyone more fabulous. When I was first alone in a room with him in 1970, I knew I was in the presence of someone who would distinguish himself. I'm quite grateful that PRC has honored me with recognition in his name. Thank you very much.